Welcome back to another Flash video tutorial. Business as usual, new ActionScript 3.0 document. And you know a little bit about variables now. I'm going to show you a specific type of variable, and I'm going to show you how to actually work with and manipulate variables. So I have my new document. I'm going to go to my timeline, and I have layer 1, frame 1. I'm going to click on it, tap F9 to bring up my actions window. And now I can start writing my code. So what is this about? I'm going to go ahead and put a comment saying this is about variables. And please go ahead and follow along with me. So variables, I'm going to be showing you a specific data type called an integer. And that is spelled like this, I-N-T-E-G-E-R, integer. And basically what an integer is, it's a whole number. So you can't have any decimals, you can't have any fractions, anything like that. It's just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You get the idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable. And what that means that just means create my variable. I need to create it before I can use it. So I'm going to write out, let me actually say variables, integers. And I'm going to say declare my variable. And the way we do that is Flash uses the keyword var, which is VAR. And you can see I have entered it correctly because it sort of turns purple, and then put a space. And you have to do this exactly like this. If you put a capital V, it's not going to work. If you put anything else weird, it's not going to work. So when I type, you need to type exactly how I'm typing. So declaring my variable var. So I need to give it a name now. And the name I want to give it is, I'm just going to say my variable. Now the way you name variables, there can be, you can only use letters or numbers and an underscore. So you can use A, B, C, D, E, F, G all the way to Z. You can use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you can use an underscore, and that's holding shift and basically the minus key. If you don't know what that is, it's this little symbol here. And the only other rule with that is that you can't start off with a number. If you start off with a number, it's going to give you a problem. So I wrote out my variable. I'm using what's called camel case, and I've capitalized. So I have technically two words here, but I'm not allowed to use spaces when naming my variable. So I just capitalize the beginning of every word that I have. So I'm starting, this is the head of my camel, this is its hump. So we have camel case, and if you start adding other words, you can see how you have a very awkward long camel. But I'm declaring my variable using the keyword var. I've named it my variable, and now I need to tell it what type. I need to tell it what type of data it's going to hold. To do that, I just have to put a colon and then give it the data type. And the data I'm going to hold is an integer, which is just short. It's shortened, so you don't have to type out integer every time. And the short version, or what you're supposed to type, is int, int. So once you do that, you've declared your variable, and you just have to end your line with a semicolon. Every time you write a line of code, well, not every time, but almost every time, and because you don't know enough yet, for now, every time, you're going to end your line of code with a semicolon. If you do not end your line of code with a semicolon, you're going to start getting problems. So I'm going to go ahead and save right now, just so that I have basically, integers. I'm going to save right now, so in case something happens, I can get some kind of file to recover later. So I'm not going to think about it, not going to worry about it, but I'm going to save, and I'm going to run my program. So I'm going to press Control and Enter to run, and absolutely nothing happens. The main thing I was looking for is to see if any errors came up, and no errors came up, so I'm good. If you don't see those windows up there, you can go under Window, and it's somewhere under here, so you have to find it right here, compiler errors. Anyway, so I've declared my variable, but it doesn't have a value yet. I think integers default to a value of 0, but we don't care about that. We want to give it a value. So I'm going to go ahead, and now that I've declared my variable, I can just call it. I can call it by what I named it. So I named it my variable. And you have to spell it out exactly the same way you did when you declared it. That means if I put something capital, or if I capitalize a letter here, I have to capitalize it later when I refer to it. So I'm going to say my variable equals 1, close semicolon. In Flash, the way you assign a value is you put your variable on the left-hand side of the equal sign, and the value you're assigning will be on the right-hand side. So if I go ahead and run it again, so I'm going to save before I run, because who knows what's going to happen. Press Control Enter, and okay, good. Still no errors. Going along pretty well right now. So I'm going back to my frame 1, back to my actions window, and I'm just going to put a comment here that says set equal to 1. And I know it's pretty straightforward, but just to get you in the practice of it, do it like I'm doing it. So I have declaring my variable, I'm setting it equal to 1. Well, how do I know that it's actually been set equal to 1? How do I know that I've actually done this correctly? Well, if you remember the trace function, so I'm going to write out trace, open a parentheses, and all you have to do to spit the value back out is type in my variable, and then oops, close the semicolon. So now, let me put a comment on here saying trace out my variable. And so now what it's going to do, it's going to set it equal to 1, and it's going to spit out my variable in the output. But it's not going to spit out the word my variable. It's going to spit out whatever value it has. Remember that I said that if you're tracing stuff out and you want to write actual text, or you want to write an actual string, sometimes called a literal, you have to surround it in double quotes. But there's no double quotes, so I'm going to save, press Control Enter to test my movie, and now you're seeing the output is 1, which is good. That's what I wanted. I wanted 1 because I set it equal to 1. But let's say I have a ton of other variables, right? I'm not sure which variable this is. Right now I only have 1, so it's no big deal. But I want to put a little more description into my trace statement. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start a double quote, and I'm going to write, this is the value of my variable, double quote, and then put a plus, space plus, and this is getting a little hard to see. So let me expand it out. Okay, so what this is doing now, it's going to write out, this is the value of my variable, and then tack on my variable to the end of it. So what it's doing, it's joining this string with whatever value my variable has. So I'm going to press Control S to save, press Control Enter to run, and now you see that this is saying this is the value of my variable 1. Uh-oh. Well, what did I do? Well, I didn't put a space here. So if I put basically it's only going to write out whatever you did. So whatever's in between these double quotes, that's what it's writing out. So what's happening is it's saying this is the value of my variable, and it's going up here. There's no space, so it's just tacking on the number 1. So I'm going to put a space here. And I'm also going to put a colon just because I like to format things nice. Control S to save. Now we're saying this is the value of my variable, and it's now 1. Pretty cool. So what else can we do with my variable? Well, we can add on to it. I'm going to say add on to it. I'll just say it for now. So how we do that, we say my variable equals my variable plus 1, and with the semicolon. And what this is going to do, it's going to set my variable equal to whatever value it had plus 1. Pretty simple, right? So I'm going to copy my trace statement, and I'm going to say this is the value of my variable plus 1. Remember, anything within double quotes is going to be considered text. So although I have a plus within my quotes and I have a plus outside of my quotes, this is considered text and this is considered part of the code. So it's saying this is the value of my variable plus 1, and then it's going to spit out my variable. So what I have done, I'm going to press Control Enter to run, and it's saying this is the value of my variable 1. This is the value of my variable plus 1, which is 2. Pretty straightforward. If you notice, it still says 1 up here and 2 up here, although we have changed the value of my variable. And the reason why that is, it's because the way the code is read, it's read from top to bottom and left to right. So it's going declare my variable, set it equal to 1, write out whatever value it has then, so there it's 1. Then we're adding on to it, and when it gets to here, it's now 2. So that's how that works. So we've wrote out, this is the value of my variable, we've added onto it, and we've traced out my variable. And you can do a bunch of other things besides just addition. So you could do my variable equals my variable minus 2. So let's say subtract from it minus 2. And then we do trace. Let's just say my variable now, add on, or join them together, my variable. So we have my variable now, let's see what it is. We can do basic math, right? It should be 0. So we have, it's the value of my variable, this is the value of my variable plus 1, which is 2, and my variable now, after we subtract 2, is 0. And let's actually change to after subtraction. So further going on, I'm going to do, let's do some multiplication. So multiplication, say my, well actually, multiplication, well okay, we'll do multiplication. My variable equals my variable times, say 3, and end it with the semicolon. And the symbol for multiplication is just a star. So if you hold shift and press down 8, it's the asterisk, the star, whatever you want to call it. We're doing multiplication. Let's trace it out. Say my variable after multiplication plus my variable to add it on. It's saying my variable after multiplication is, well, it'll probably be 0 because 0 times 0 is 0. And you see I forgot to put a space in the colon and make it all pretty here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let's not subtract. Let's see. Let's start off with the value of 10, right? So I'm just going to change the value of my variable to 10 at the start. So when I set it equal to 1, I'm actually going to set it equal to 10. So I'm declaring it, setting equal to 10, and now I'm going to do my addition, my subtraction, and my multiplication. So I press Control Enter to run my movie, saying this is the value of my variable, so it's 10. It's the value of my variable plus 1, 11. My variable after subtraction is 9, and my variable after multiplication is 27. So, well, if you weren't expecting it, guess what we're doing next? Division. Oops, division. So I'm going to go ahead and say trace my variable. Oops, actually, sorry. I need to do division first. So my variable equals my variable divided by, let's say 3. So we get our original value. I'm going to trace my variable after division and say my variable. And I'm going to save and run my code. Now it says 10, 11, 9, 27. Then after division is 9. Cool. That means it's working correctly. Now let me just show you what happens when you spell your variable wrong. So I'm going to type my variable, and you notice how I made the v lowercase. And I'm just going to set it equal to 0 and end my line of code with a semicolon. I'm going to go ahead and save and run. And now when I do this, you see in my output, it's blank. That's because there was an error. And if I go under compiler errors, it's saying access of undefined property my variable. That's because Flash considers a lowercase v, my variable with a lowercase v, to be a different variable from a capitalized V. So because it's not spelled exactly the same, it's saying you haven't created this yet. You've created my variable with a capital V, but there is no my variable with a lowercase v. Now I'm going to show you a nifty little trick. We're going to go back up to the line where we added on to our code, And instead of typing out my variable equals my variable plus 1, we can do a shortcut. And the shortcut for that is whatever type of operation. So this will work for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Instead of doing my variable equals my variable plus 1, you can just go ahead and type in my variable plus equals whatever value. And what that's going to do, it's going to say my variable is going to equal itself plus 1. And you can do this here as well. So I'm going to say, instead of all this, I'm going to do, minus equals. The whatever type of addition, multiplication, whatever you're trying to do comes before the equal sign. So my variable minus equals 2. And I'm going to say my variable times equals 3. And division, we're going to say my variable divided by equals 3. So I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to test it, make sure it works. So we have, here we go. Okay, sorry. My flash was lagging a little bit. So we have the value of my variable is 10. This is the value of my variable plus 1, which is 11. After subtracting 2, it's 9. Multiply by 3 is 27. And divide by 3 is back to 9. Cool. So everything's working so far. But remember when I said that integers only hold whole numbers? They only hold 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've got lucky so far. And we have only done things that have resulted in whole numbers. So if I end up with 9 at the end here, what if I divided by 2? That would get me 4.5, right? I'm going to say my variable, let's see. Let's make this simple. So my variable equals my variable divided by 2. And I'm just going to use this because it might be easier to do this format. You can use either format. You can use this format or this format. When you're writing your code, it's just whatever you prefer. This type of format is usually quicker. So when you get more advanced, more into it, that'll make a lot more sense. So I have my variable after division is that, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing my variable dividing by 2, and make sure you end with a semicolon. So how does it say, so I'm going to say divide by 2 as a comment. Make a new line. And now we're going to trace this out. So we're going to say trace. Let's see. What happens with a decimal? Question mark. And I'll put a space and the double quote. Add on my variable. Just join it together. So now it's going to say, well, what happens with a decimal when using an integer? And let's make this a little nicer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this out. So make sure we have trace, the opening parenthesis, the ending parenthesis, and okay, we have my so we're going to write out what happens with a decimal when using an integer. So I'm going to say let's trace out my variable by itself, because that'll be the line after, and we'll see what it actually spits out. So remember, when we divide by 2, this should get 4.5. Let's see what it actually does. So you have, this is the value of my variable, 10, 11, 9, 27, 9. And what happens with the decimal when using an integer? Instead of 4.5, which is half of 9, it only shows 4. So no matter what value whatever decimal value you have, it's going to get dropped. So if I were to, here, let's, instead of divide by 2, let's reset our variable. I'm going to take my variable divided by 2. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And I'm going to write my variable equals, let's see, 0.99. Because that's as close to 1 as you can pretty much get, right? And you can even say 99999. So what happens with a decimal when using an integer? Save it. Control Enter to run. Now it's saying what happens with a decimal when using an integer? 0. It gets dropped. So remember that with integers, they're whole numbers only, no decimals. And if you try doing things like 1 divided by 2 to get half, or you want to get, integers aren't the way to go. So be very careful when you're storing values in integers that are decimals. So that's about it. So we used var to declare our variable, the keyword var, and we're giving it a name of my variable, which remember it has to begin with a letter. It can only use letters and numbers, and can use underscores if you'd like, but it has to begin with a letter. It's case sensitive, so you have to spell it out the same way every time. So we have declaring a variable, the name of the variable. They'll use a colon to separate. This is just, you have to do this. This is part of what's called syntax. Say my variable colon and then tell it what type. So this is type integer. And the way we do that is int, and it needs to be spelled just like that. Then, being the good little programmers that we are, we end with a semicolon. And then we're going to trace out. We can join stuff together with the plus symbol when we're using text and variables. We can add on to our variable. We can subtract from our variable. We can do multiplication with our variable. We can do division with our variable. And we can reset our variable. So go ahead, play around with that. You have whatever preference you prefer. So instead of doing my variable plus equals 1, you can do my variable equals my variable plus 1. Whatever syntax you want, that's fine. You can use either one. They do the same thing. Just make sure you understand this. And if you don't, ask me a question. Because if you do not understand this, you are going to get lost. You will maybe come cry to me later. I'll tell you, hey, stop crying. I'm here for you. So ask me a question if you don't get this, because we're going to go so deep with this. So deep. We're going to be in the bottom of the ocean. And hopefully you bring your scuba tanks. Because if not, well, you're going to be sleeping with the fishes. So, thanks for watching.